So remember when I said
I'm confident that I can get the other side done a lot quicker.
after I had finished removing the bottom paint from the port side? Well, it didn't quite go the way I was hoping. It turns out removing all of the paint from a 32-foot, almost 60-year-old wooden boat is really time-consuming. I started by removing the aft chain plates from the hull. They're basically large, thick strips of metal, bronze in this case, that are bolted through the wood. They hold one end of each of the shrouds or stays that support the mast. Think the guy lines supporting a telephone pole or a radio tower. Since my boat is a ketch, it has two masts. The larger main mast is at the front, or fore of the ship, and the smaller mizzen is at the rear or aft. It has 3 chain plates on either side of each mast, so 6 per mast and 12 in total.
Wait a second. Aha.
In order to remove the mizzen chain plates, I had to wriggle into the lazarette, the space under the back deck. It's a little cramped under there. I was also going to do the main mast chain plates, but the bolts are hidden behind some sort of ledger, so I'll have to do that later. After the chain plates were out of the way, I got back into paint stripping mode, starting by scraping the loose paint off like last time. Since this paint behaves more like the stuff I'm used to, I was able to use the larger infrared heater to remove larger patches of paint at a time. Plus, it scrapes off so much nicer. I I also ended up adjusting the fins on the heater so that the lamp was close to the wood, which made it work much faster. It seems like the key to getting the wood as clear of paint as possible is a sharp scraper, and the steel scrapers I have dull really quickly, even the carbon steel blades. I'm going to try to get my hands on a carbide scraper for the other side. I think it will help a lot. Once I had a spot scraped, it was sanding time. Yay. I've set up my sander to collect as much dust as possible. I use mesh sanding discs with a modified platen. That's the pad on the sander that the disc attaches to, that has lots of holes in it. I also use a backpack vacuum that I bought refurbished from the Makita Service Center. That's where most of my power tools have come from, that or secondhand. We're starting to see some new life on my friend's farm as spring arrives. The sow gave birth to piglets. Unfortunately, a couple didn't make it, but that's life on a farm. Raising animals can be tough. Luckily, the 3 that did make it are getting stronger every day and are beginning to run around. I'm also getting the garden prepped for the growing season. I'd like to become less reliant on the chain grocery stores here, which are becoming more and more expensive. We're getting lots of April showers. It's been nice listening to the rain while I read in my tent with a fire going in the little stove. I'm reading a book called The Saga of Simba that David from Halifax sent me in the mail. It's about a passage in 1933 from Nova Scotia to Fiji, made in a little schooner called Simba, built near Lunenburg. It's a really great read. I highly recommend it if you like sailing adventure novels. While I was scraping, I couldn't quite reach the upper plank comfortably with my small step stool, but I also couldn't fit the 6-foot ladder between the shelter and the hull. I decided to make something custom based off of a small work platform I had used a few years ago. I was considering buying one, but they're like $120, and I had a bunch of scrap wood lying around. Plus, by this point, I hadn't built anything in a couple months and was jonesing for a bit of rough woodworking. It's about 18 inches high and gives me room to move around, unlike the ladder. Plus, when I'm done here, it'll make a nice little rustic coffee table. Also, since the topside paint seems a lot more inert, I ended up switching back to a more relaxed work getup. As much as I like the German safety goggles, they can feel a bit claustrophobic. And then it was back to scraping, and sanding, and scraping. Honestly, it was getting a bit mind-numbing on my own. Somehow I convinced a few friends to come help me do a bit of scraping. They were an enormous help. We worked in teams of 2, one person on an infrared heater and one person scraping. With both hands on the scraper, I was able to put a lot more force into it, and it was so much faster and easier. We also did a bit of work on the trail boards. Those are the ornamental moldings at the bow, removing plugs and any of the bronze screws that would back out. I'll finish off the trail boards later on. I'll have to remove and rebuild them eventually. In a few hours, we made quick work of scraping the remaining half of the topside paint. One of my friends made an incredible meal for us too. She put together a cheese and cracker board and made a wicked pot of chili that hit the spot after all that work. The next day, I got back on sanding the remaining paint that was too stubborn to scrape off. I also, very cautiously, used a belt sander on the flatter section at the bow, being extra careful not to take off too much wood.
Okay. Here goes nothing.
The orbital is great, but it's really slow, even with an aggressive grid of sanding disc. And that's where things stand right now. There's a few spots that I couldn't reach with the sanders, but half of her paint is off and the planking is all exposed on the port side. Honestly, it looks like it's in really good shape from the outside. There are a few planks that will need to be replaced and some small spots where I'll need to deal with rot and install something called graving pieces, but I'll go into that in more detail later. I also want to start loading up the wood with raw tung oil to help revive it and give it some protection after 13 years out of the water. I think I'm going to take a break from paint stripping though. It's honestly driving me a bit bonkers. I think I'll tackle the deck house next, and I never got around to that other project on the tent, but we'll see how that goes. Until next time, writing you from a boat in the woods, Joshua.